Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I know there are competing priorities this Sunday, millions of other things you could do, but in particular, there's the pancake breakfast next door, so I am very impressed that people are still here. There are donuts in the back. Please don't be shy about helping yourself. So my name is Simon Zachary. I'm a Jesuit in training. I like to refer to myself as a baby Jesuit, meaning I'm not ordained a priest yet, but I'm about halfway through the process, and I have the good fortune, I have the blessing of working at Brophy just across the street as part of my formation. So what I thought we might do this morning is just kind of go through and maybe demystify or debunk what is this process of formation for Jesuits? So in other words, what is it like to become a priest? What all is involved? What are the different stages that all entails? I want to start us out with a video that gives, I think, a really nice overview. It's done by Father Chris Calderon, whom some of you might know. He was, I see some heads nodding. He was here this past summer helping out at the parish, and he also worked at Brophy a number of years ago. So he gives a good overview of what is this thing called formation, what's involved in becoming a Jesuit priest.
Hi, I'm Father Chris Calderon, a Jesuit priest originally from Los Angeles. One question I frequently get asked is, how long does it take to become a Jesuit priest or brother? Well, there's no set amount of time, but 10 to 12 years of training, formation as we call it, is pretty standard. The follow-up question is always, why does it take so long? And that's an easy answer. It's the way our founder, St. Ignatius Loyola, wanted it. In the 1500s, when Ignatius formed the Society of Jesus, the Catholic Church had no standardized training for priests or religious. Many priests had virtually no theological education. Ignatius wanted his men to be a different sort of clergy, rigorously educated and competent to take on a variety of ministries. So he developed a program of formation, which Jesuits have basically followed ever since. It entails 5 stages: novitiate, first studies, regency, theology, and finally tertianship. As a recently ordained priest, I've completed all stages but tertianship. The past dozen years of my formation as a Jesuit have been filled with incredibly meaningful experiences of ministry and learning. I've studied at Loyola University Chicago, Boston College, and Harvard. I've worked with migrants on the Mexican border and developmentally disabled people in Seattle. I taught high school in Arizona and even served as the chaplain of the Boston College baseball team. Go Eagles! Since Jesuit formation is unlike seminary training of diocesan priests, and even from other orders, we thought it'd be a good idea to demystify the whole process. In this series of short videos on our vocation website, beajesuit.org, I'll guide you through each of the 5 stages. If you have further questions, feel free to fill out the inquiry form on the site, and a Jesuit will be in touch with you shortly.
Okay, so that was a brief overview from Chris Calderon about what all is involved in formation. And just in case you didn't get all of those steps, I thought I'd kind of write them down for us one more time. I'll talk a little bit through the stages I've been through so far, and then I really want to highlight the regency stage, which is where I'm at right now. All right, so novitiate, that's about 2 years, and I started that was in Culver City, just outside of Los Angeles. Lots of good stuff involved there. So really what it is trying on this life as a Jesuit. We go through the spiritual exercises. That's a 30-day silent retreat. So my friends and I were forced to be silent, believe it or not, for 30 days. We tried not to cheat. Maybe some more than others. Really what that is just an experience of encountering God, of praying through Scripture, through moments of Jesus' life, in maybe a more pointed or intimate way. Becoming more familiar and really seeing how has God been at work in your own life too, when you step back over the years and examine that. So that was a really powerful experience. There also were a number of different service components to being in Culver City. So during that period of time, I think a few of us worked as hospital chaplains. We did some prison ministry. I worked at a high school. I visited with Jesuits in our retirement home. So it's really just a chance to sort of sample or preview all of the different Jesuit works, or get a brief taste as much as you could over kind of a short period of time. The phase after that, which is another 2 to 3 years, is called First Studies. You'll find Jesuits have, bless you, Jesuits have all of these terms that sometimes can sound a little bit esoteric or isolated, but I'll see if we can break them down kind of in layman's terms. First Studies is essentially your first go at getting a master's degree. It's a chance to really go deep into philosophy, the philosophical tradition of the church, to understand, what's the relationship between philosophy and theology. How's that informed? How has reason informed faith? Also, what's really neat is we've been giving guys the opportunity to study something else that they're interested in addition to philosophy. So if you have some other academic pursuit, that's a chance to go after that. So I studied philosophy over at Fordham University. That's in the Bronx borough of New York City. And I studied philosophy, but I also did a degree in political economy, which is sort of half economics and half politics, and really a look at the developing world and how do countries get themselves out of poverty. And it was striking to do that being in the Bronx borough of New York City, surrounded by so many immigrants, so many people who had just moved to the States. So that was a really formative experience for me. Right now, I'm in Regency, so across the street again at Brophy, and I've been there for about bless you, I've been there for a year and a half or so, and probably will be there for 1 more year. After that, move on to theology. So guys either study at Boston College or Santa Clara's got a school at Berkeley. And really what that is a chance to go deeper into Scripture, a chance to familiarize oneself with the sacraments, really preparing for that last phase before moving on to priesthood. Tertianship happens years after you're ordained, and that's a chance to reacquaint oneself with the spiritual exercises. You're already a priest at that point, but to kind of revisit everything you've been exposed to so far. I'll share with you just a little bit about my Regency experience so far over at Brophy. The picture at the top left, I took the selfie. I took the very first day that I started teaching, and my facial expression quickly changed from being one of a smile to one of real anxiety, if I can be honest. I remember that day so distinctly, right? I could not get the projector to work. There was not a teacher to be found, not another teacher to be found in the hallway. I had prepared these PowerPoint slides for weeks and weeks leading ahead of that, and so we just kind of shrugged our shoulders and tried the best that we could without technology. I guess people have been doing that for hundreds of years, but we we somehow managed. I finished class 15 minutes early. I would not say that first period was a raging success, but for me, that was an awakening and an eye-opening experience as to both the challenge and the joy of teaching. I had worked before I became a Jesuit. I worked for corporate America in the online advertising sector for about 6 years before I became a Jesuit. That had its own challenges, but everyone had warned me, teaching is a wonderful experience, but you also wear yourself out. And I had no idea until I started. And that first day with the technology snafu was just sort of a preview of that. It's been a really remarkable year and a half so far. Lots of just incredible experiences. The photo from the bottom left is of some students in my economics class, and they had just finished baking cookies. So what we did was I had them bake cookies, and the goal was not only to get an experience of, how do you use an oven, how do you not burn yourself, and all these other things, but also, can you calculate the costs associated with cookies? Can you have sort of a real world experience of what is it like to manage a budget and try to figure out what all is involved in something, and could you sell this? Could you eventually sell cookies and try to make a profit? So those 4 individuals were the finalists for our competition. They had the best tasting cookies in the class. Something I try to ask myself every day when I get up in the morning, and admittedly, sometimes I do a better job at this than others. Sometimes not always perfect, but the 2 questions I ask myself: number 1, can I try to make today relevant for students? Can I try to make whatever lesson we're working on relevant for them, that it applies to their own life experience? And then the second one is, is there a way to relate whatever we're learning and give kids an encounter with God, or this sense that God is at work in their lives and the lives of other people? A real challenge, and one that I try to keep in mind every day. The last picture that I'll talk about ever so briefly, I'm not the best at taking selfies. Some faces cut off there, but that last picture we took actually in Spain. So this past summer I had the opportunity to go to Spain to do what's called the Camino Ignaciano, which is to retrace the steps of St. Ignatius. We started in his hometown of Loyola, and then we ended in Manresa, where he had written the spiritual exercises. Lots and lots and lots of walking involved, probably the likes of 20 miles or so per day. What you can't see in this picture are all the bruises and blisters that the boys in the group and myself had gotten, but really just an eye-opening experience and a chance to get a sense of what Ignatius's life would look like, as well as for the boys and for me to take a look at our own lives and examine our own spiritual journeys. So I've done a lot of talking. I will pause here and maybe see what sort of questions any of you have. So we'll leave some time for that. Great question. I should have mentioned that. So I teach economics to juniors, and then I also teach seniors. I teach a class called Conflict in the Modern World, which is sort of like a 20th century history class plus a comparative politics class rolled up into one. I've got one of my current students, Joe, in the peanut gallery, so he can give you the real scoop if you want it. Sure. Any other questions? Yeah.
What part of Spain are you talking about?
Sure. I wish I had a map. We started out in the western region of northwestern portion of Spain. That's where Loyola is. Started there, and then Manresa is kind of in the northeastern portion of the country. Sure. Manresa is. Manresa is kind of closer to the Mediterranean Sea, and then Loyola is a little bit closer to Lisbon, to Portugal.
My best name comes from Spain. My best name is Magdalena, and I noticed this from the south of France, so I'm a little bit French, a little bit Mexican, I mean, all over the place.
That's great.
That's what I always say.
Mix of everything. It's always fun to be able to retrace the roots and to see where in each country,
And I went to Spain and I couldn't find the Magdalena town.
You couldn't find the town. Now an excuse to go back, right? Yeah, there you go. What do they call me? I just go by Mr. Zachary. Sometimes it is a little confusing, right? Wearing the clerics around campus. So some students will call me Father, just if they're not aware. But I'll say in class, I'm only a baby Jesuit. I'm a Jesuit in training. Sure, that's a great question. So I got just a little bit by the way of workshops here and there over the years, and also my background having worked in the business world. In terms of very formal teaching experience, not that much, to be totally honest with you. And that was part of the real learning involved. You know, I showed up and I thought, I think I'm ready, but I really I had so much to kind of take on. But it's a real process. Yeah, go ahead.
So prior to the novitiate, what sort of formation or study, how do people go from calling up and say, yeah, you know, this is something I'd like to talk to you about, to making it through to novitiate?
Great question. So Jesuits call that process like a discernment process. It looks really different for each guy. For me, I actually am from Phoenix and went to Brophy myself. And so I had started thinking about becoming a Jesuit in high school. And back then I thought, gosh, I am crazy. Like there's no way that I'll actually go through with this. And the thought stuck in my head for long enough, for about 15 years or so, and I could not shake it. And because that kept coming up in my prayer, then I decided, you know, I really should pay attention to this. But to answer your question, any guy who's discerning, regardless of the amount of time, would start seeing another Jesuit, meeting with another Jesuit for what's called spiritual direction. So just to you know, keep the conversation going, to get some help to kind of piece it all together. It does seem like it would be a fit. The novitiate, which is where I spent the first couple of years of formation, they do all sorts of informational events, and so I went there a couple times just to get a preview of it all. The novitiate for our province is in Culver City, so it's just on the west side of Los Angeles. And I should talk about provinces maybe a little bit too. So the Jesuits are organized geographically. And here in the United States, there are 4 regions. There's one out east, there's the Central Southern Province, there's the Midwest Province, and we're called Jesuits West. So Jesuits West spans from Arizona all the way up to Alaska, mostly the mountain states plus the West Coast. From Phoenix. I did go to Brophy, so it's really neat to have a chance to come back. Sorry. 2002 and 2. Yeah, there are a handful of teachers who are still around. Some have been around for 30 or 40 years. Bob Ryan, who's the principal there, used to work in the campus ministry office when I was a student. Seamus Walsh, who is one of the assistant principals, he was also in the campus ministry office. So it's great to be back in good company with some solid people. And I would say, I think the best part about teaching high school, especially once you get over that hump, you know, after that first day and once you sort of figure it all out, there's just a real sense of joy, I think, among students, both at Brophy and really in any high school setting, a sense of joy and hopefulness for the future, and that really feeds me. I feel really fortunate to be exposed to all of that.
So before, you obviously went to Brophy and then to college. Sure. Did you ever think to be a teacher before, you know, obviously the Jesuit order was kind of in your mind, but you obviously were advertising. Sure. So do you feel that kind of God led you to be a teacher in that process so that you would be, you know, it's a process, but that you can see more of the Jesuit order and how it works and, it led you to teach, I guess is what you're saying. Sure. But you're still in formation.
It is kind of funny how the process work or how God is at work in all of our lives in this kind of circuitous way. I think for me, when I was working, I started volunteer teaching not with high school students, but I had taught ESL classes to adults, English as a second language. And that was really good, and I enjoyed it. I still felt like something was missing. You know, there was this thought of, well, yeah, I could do this and it would be good. Even though I hadn't tried out high school yet, I thought this could be really interesting. But I think the piece that was missing was the faith component. That's what kept kind of drawing me in, is like, I want to sort of go deeper, have a focus on prayer life, have an experience of what is all that wraps around in terms of the larger context. Yeah. Yes. So the provincial is. He is based in Portland currently. Scott Santa Rosa, I think he's come back to Phoenix a number of times. Really, really good guy. I'll be on my best behavior. So he's the guy who sort of has conversations with Jesuits around the region and sort of decides what would make the best sense in terms of assignments. It's a two-way conversation. So a lot of it is about, well, what do you feel like you really want at this period of time? Where do you think you're going to flourish? As well as he has sort of a bird's eye view picture. So he might look and see, well, where are the needs? Where are the needs in the province? Maybe there's a certain city or a certain work where guys can find themselves. And Jesuits do all kinds of amazing things. That's part of what had attracted me to this order is there's really something for everyone. You could teach high school if you're interested in that. There are Jesuits at a number of universities. I think we have 28 or so across the United States. There are Jesuits who work as engineers, believe it or not. I know a couple of Jesuits who are physicians, who are MDs. So you really can sort of take your interests and put them to good work, to work for the church, and there are needs everywhere. So it's we definitely take all kinds in our company.
So you are almost halfway?
Yeah, I would say I'm just a little over halfway there. I'm 6 years or so in.
6 more years, we will see you here in Nest.
God willing. So I have about 1, maybe 2 more years at Brophy, and then 3 years of theology. And after theology, that's when guys get ordained and become priests.
We're gonna give it a run.
Sorry?
We're gonna give it a run.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you think you're going to teach after you're ordained?
Good question. I would love to go back to a high school setting. I'm veering too far away. I would love to be in a high school setting post ordination. We'll see what that would look like. We have, I think, just roughly 10 high schools or so in the western region of the country. So it could be in any number of those cities.
That's what I was going to ask. So how does that work when, like, if you'd like to be a teacher, there's enough schools that's a possibility, but somebody, I want to go work at the Vatican Observatory in Tucson, or I want to work here. How does that work? Well, I'm sure Father Scott Santa Rosa doesn't just say, okay, you can go do whatever you want.
Sure.
So how does that, do you apply for it and then they discern it as well?
Yeah, you would apply. That's a great question. You would apply for those roles just as you would a lay person. If you were a lay person interested in a teaching position at any institution, you'd still apply. So it's kind of balancing out what you're interested in versus what's available. Maybe your background is in science, right? And there's only one school in the region that needs a science teacher, and the others don't. That might kind of color where you could find yourself. It also might come down to what are the needs at the moment. So maybe it's that a bunch of pastors at various parishes have just retired, and so they might say, why don't you try out this for a couple years, because there's a real need to have Jesuits there. So that's what Father Scott Santa Rosa is really good at. He has kind of all that collective info and can sort of route people in the right path. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your time and you being here and all of the engagement. Still a few donuts in the back, I think, as well as some bottles of water, so don't be shy. Thanks a lot. And pancakes next door if you're interested.